Hello everyone, my name is Jane and welcome to my October wrap-up. So October. I was anticipating October so much because this is the spooky month and Halloween and everything, and I was saving so many horror books, especially for October, but unfortunately, although October started really strong, I just went into a reading slump and I can't tell you why, because I don't know why. Like again, October started really strong and suddenly I DNF 3 books, which never happens. Like I almost don't DNF books at all, and if yes, it's max 1 month, and I don't know, I just went into a state that I don't want to read anything, which is really disappointing for me because I really wanted to read a lot of horror books and a lot of spooky books in October, and yes, it's like pretty sad, but I decided not to force myself to read and just not to read at all, because in November there is the Pokemon-ATHON, the Pokemon themed readathon that I created, so I really wanted to be in a reading mood for the readathon, and I think this is the best decision that I could make because I am starting to miss reading. So yes, I almost didn't read anything in October. Overall, I read 6 books. Now yes, 6 books is a lot. Like there is people that read 6 books in a year, not in a month. That's still pretty amazing. I'm just reading usually more than 10 books a month. So for me, this number is really low compared to what I'm usually reading. And in addition to those 6 books, I DNF 3 books. I'm not going to include those 3 books in the reading stats of the month, but I am going to talk about them when I will get to the books themselves. Now, out of those 6 books, 3 of them were physical books and 3 of them were audiobooks. It's okay, I usually listen to a lot of audiobooks. I do think that usually most of the books that I'm reading are audiobooks, but I'm not sure. Yes, like it's logical. 6 books, 3 audio, 3 physical. Now, the cool thing is that 5 of them were adult books and only 1 of them was a young adult book, which is really cool because I am trying to read more adult books because it's just more fitting to my age group. But the really interesting thing is that out of all the 6 books that I read, my favorite one was the young adult, so that's interesting, but I'm still really glad that I read so many adult books because this is one of my goals, so that's amazing. And I read 3 standalones and 3 series. I am trying to read more series and to finish more series. The 3 books that I read were a start of a series, so that's not good for the goal of finishing series, but it's still nice. And genres. I read 2 mystery books, 2 fantasy, 1 romance, and 1 horror. Like I said, I planned to read so many horror books in October, and if I read the usual amount that I'm reading, most of the genres were probably mystery, thrillers, and horror. But yes, I feel like it's still fitting. I read pretty spooky books. Like most of the books that I read were spooky. And star ratings, I read 2 4 stars, 1 3.5 stars, and 3 3 stars. So also the books that I read weren't the best. Like yes, I had 2 4 stars, but actually one of them is more of a 3.75 stars. I'm just counting it as a 4 for the stats. But yes, also the amount that I read wasn't the best. And also the books themselves, I didn't really enjoy them, so that's pretty sad. And my average star rating is 3.41. I feel like most of my average star ratings are less than 3.5, which is again pretty sad. I just feel like this whole year, all 2021, most of the books I read, I don't enjoy them. So hopefully 2022 will be better because we are getting to 2022, so I do have high hopes for this year. But yes, those were the stats. Now let's talk about the books themselves. And yes, the first book that I read in October was The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. I read it in an audiobook, and basically this is a thriller mystery, and we are following a journalist that gets an assignment to go to a cruise ship and write about the cruise ship. So this is a thriller in a ship in the sea, so you can't escape. So that's the thing that I love the most in the thriller, the setting. I just love books in water setting, and I feel like this book definitely delivered the water setting that I was looking for. Now I enjoyed this book. I gave it 3.5 stars. Unfortunately, it wasn't as enjoyable as a 4-star read. It was fun. I had a good time with it. I really love the narrator of Ruth Ware audiobooks because she is so good. She's really good with giving you the atmosphere and the creepy vibe of Ruth Ware stories. So I really enjoyed the audiobook and the narrator. And I also already recommended this book in a recommendations video. So I did enjoy it, but it wasn't as enjoyable as I hoped for. It was okay, like 3.5 stars, more enjoyable than average read. And yes, it was nice. And then I read my first DNF of October, and this is Misery by Stephen King. I'm holding it upside down, but basically I was really anticipating to read it because everyone are hyping this book so much, and also the story sounds really interesting because basically we are following an author that was kidnapped, and the kidnapper is basically one of his biggest fans, and she makes him keep writing books for her, and if he won't write, she will torture him. So like the story and the premise sounds amazing. I really love books about authors. I just really love reading and writing, so like books that are about reading or writing always get to me. And I really waited to read this book, like I wanted to read it for so long. And unfortunately, I started to read it and I just couldn't connect to the writing. Now, the thing is that the story was really interesting to me and I actually wanted to keep reading, but I just couldn't, I guess because of the writing style. I read one book by Stephen King in the past, it was scary, but I also didn't enjoy it. The thing is that I was really impressed from Stephen King writing, but I still didn't connect to it. And after DNF'd Misery, I just realized that Stephen King is basically a classic. Like, all of his books were written a long time ago, and I feel like maybe I'm not really connecting to old writing style. Like, usually the books that I read are more modern and with a modern writing style. So I just feel like maybe reading books from this time is just really hard for me. I don't read classics, like never. I tried a few times in my life and I just can't read classics. It's just not a thing that I can do. Now, this is of DNF. I will get to it in the future. I just feel like I need to be more ready and more in a ready mindset for it and not just take it like I did. So yes, I think that I read a fourth of the book. Okay, I actually read a good amount, like almost an half. It will take me time to get to it again because I do want to forget most of the things. But yes, unfortunately, everyone loved Misery so much, but I DNF'd it. I couldn't keep reading it. I hope in the future, the day that I will read Misery will come. The next book that I read was an audiobook. This was Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansela. And this is basically a cozy mystery. We're following a woman that works in a restaurant with her family. And then one day, someone dies in the restaurant and the police is trying to blame them for poisoning this man. So the main character of the story tries to investigate what actually happened by herself to prove that her family is innocent. Now, the idea sounds really interesting and I did enjoy the audiobook, but it was like, okay, it was those kind of books that you just listen to, but you don't really connect to the characters or to the writing. Like for me, this is the perfect example for a forgettable book. I know that I read it, it was nice, but I would forget it already now. I almost don't remember most of the things that happened in the book. It was just a really forgettable book. I gave it 3 stars, just an average book, didn't felt anything special for it. So yes, then I read my favorite book of the month, and this is This Witches Don't Born by Isabel Sterling. This is a first book in a duology, and this is basically a contemporary fantasy, also a romance. It's a sapphic book, and it just was so much fun. We are following a teenager witch, and she has a lot of drama, also in her personal love life, and also in her fantasy witch life. The plot here was so good. I really love the characters. I read it in one day because I just couldn't stop listening to it. I really wanted to finish the book because I just enjoyed it so much. It was just so surprised for me. I did expect something fun and easy and just enjoyable, but it was just so much more. The plot was so fast-paced and so good. And again, the characters were really good. I really loved the representation in it. And I just feel like everything here was just so fun and so enjoyable. I already recommended it, I think in 2 videos already, because I just loved it so much. I really don't want to stop talking about it. I'm really excited to get to the second book. It was just so fun and again, really surprising. And I just feel like it was perfect to read it in October because it's fantasy, but about witches. It also really gives me October vibes from the cover. So it was just really fun. I really recommend it. My favorite book of the month. I gave it 4 stars and I can't wait to get to the next one. And then the next book that I read was Mexcian Gothic by Silvia Moreno Gracia. I read it for the Enchanted Book Club. This is a new book club that only started in October. This was our first read. We are going to do the live show soon, so I will link to the live show in the video description. If you want to see my full thoughts about this book, you can watch the live show. But in summary, I was pretty disappointed from this book. I initially gave it 3 stars. That's why in the stats it's 3 stars. But I did lower it to 2.5, and I'm still debating between 2 and 2.5. I just feel like overall, this kind of horror books really depends on the writing style, because overall this is a horror atmospheric book about a woman who goes to a creepy house to save her cousin, and I just feel like this kind of horror, which is the atmospheric horror, is for me one of my favorite kinds of sub-genres. But I do feel that the thing is that you really need to connect to the writing in order to enjoy this kind of book. Naturally, there is less plot in those kind of books, and I don't know, I just feel like I didn't really connect to the writing style. The book was pretty boring for me, and for me personally, I was bored most of the time that I read this book, and I really wanted it to be over. And yes, I'm glad that I read it, but unfortunately, it was the worst book that I finished this month. And yes, again, if you want to see my full thoughts, you can check the live show discussing Mexcian Gothic. Remember that in the start of the video, I said that October started really strong. So all the books that I talk about until now were in the first week of October. I read so much. It was really, really amazing. And then I DNF'd 2 books. And the thing is that those DNFs are for sure a soft DNF because I actually really enjoyed those 2 books. And the reason that I DNF'd them is because I just couldn't be in a reading mood and I couldn't enjoy what I'm reading. Now, the first book that I started to read and DNF'd is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. I was anticipating this book so much because basically this is a dark academia book, the King Arthur retelling, and I just heard amazing reviews about this book and I started to listen to it in an audiobook. And in the start, I was so invested in the story. I really loved the writing, I really connected to it. Also, the narrator was really good and I just really loved the vibe of the story. But as I kept listening to it, I just realized that as the time passes, I start to understand things less and less. And the reason that I decided to DNF it is because I do want to read it physically, not in the audio, because I just felt that all the fantasy and the magic system started to get really confusing on audio. The reason that I picked it on audio from the start is because I heard so many recommendations to read it in audio because it's pretty slow paced. But honestly, I don't think you should read it in audio. Like, I found it really confusing. Again, all the fantasy elements and all the magic system. And I actually read a big chunk of it, like I read something like 50%. So I am going to pick it again in the future. It will take me time to get to it again because I do want to try and forget most of the things that happened. But yes, like I enjoyed it and I just couldn't really understand what is happening only in audio. So that's why I DNF'd it. And the second book that I DNF'd is Dark and Shallow Lies by Ginny Meyer-Sain. Now I read it also in an audiobook. This is also a fantasy. It's more of a thriller, fantasy, mystery, atmospheric book and I loved it so much. I'm not sure how much I read. I feel like a fourth of the book. We are following a teenager that every summer goes to this town to visit her grandmother, and in this town all the children has a special power, and also this town is like in the middle of nowhere. It's really hard to get to it, and the whole book was so atmospheric, like the exact thing that I really love. I enjoyed it so much, and the reason that I DNF'd it is because I just felt the reading slump. I just felt it coming, and I felt like if I would keep reading it until the end, I won't enjoy it to the full potential that I could enjoy it if I were in a reading mood. And I also really want to give this book a chance physically and not in the audio because I really enjoyed it. Like, this is those kind of books that can be potentially 5 stars for me, which is really amazing. I just really connected to the writing style. So yes, this is the second book that I decided to DNF. And yes, again, all the books that I talked until now were in the first week of October. And since the first week, I read 2 more books. The first book that I read was The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. I read it in an audiobook. And basically in this story, we are following a company, and this company does DNA tests. And the goal is to match people based on their DNA and on their genetics. And they are giving scores to people on how much they can match based on their DNA and how good their match will be. And we are following a woman that does this DNA test. And then she is getting a really high score with the CEO of the company, and she hates this man. Like, this is enemies to lovers. It was just so fun, so enjoyable. It was really a goofy book, but in a really good way. It was the exact thing that I needed after this really hard reading month. It was like a really fun, quick, easy romance, which is perfect for a reading slump. This is the book that I gave it 4 stars, and I did lower it to 3.75. I really enjoyed it. Also already recommended it. I just feel like the last 10-20% of the book aren't really satisfying. Like, the end was okay. I just didn't like the way the end was made. Like, I was okay with the end. I just didn't love the execution. And yes, like, it was really enjoyable. This is the only audiobook that I could actually listen to and finish since I got into my reading slump. So that's already saying a lot because I couldn't read anything else except it. And yes, it was fun. And then the last book that I read is The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin. The reason that I read it is for a Broken Earth Along. This is the Broken Earth read along that I am hosting with a few booktube friends, and we started in October to read the first book, and I was actually really afraid to really not enjoy it because of the reading slump. And this is basically a post-apocalyptic adult fantasy. It's like a hard book to read, so I really was afraid that it will be just too hard for me right now, and I saved it for the last week of October. I only finished reading it yesterday, but reading slump wise, it was actually okay. Like, I read it and I could read it. It wasn't bad for me. I actually could read and to understand and to concentrate on the book. It was pretty good, so I was surprised from it. But overall, I know that everyone gives this book 5 stars. Like, I see so many amazing reviews about it. I gave it 3 stars stars. I'm sorry. I'm going to leave the link also for our 5th season live show in the video description so you can see my full thoughts on this book. I did like it, I just didn't love it. It was nice and I'm really intrigued to continue the series and to see where the series is going to go after this. I'm just not sure what I feel about the end of the book and about the twist that happened in the book. So I feel like 3 stars is the perfect star rating for me, for how I feel about this book. And yes, the link for the live show will be in the video description. So yes, October wasn't the best. Like also the books that I read weren't my favorites. I still read a lot because I read 6 books and I also DNF'd 3 books that I read a really good amount of. But again, the majority of the books that I read were in the first week of October, which was perfect. Like I really didn't expect reading slump, but I'm really happy that I just stopped reading when I realized that I'm in a reading slump, because now in November I would actually be able to read and to enjoy the readathon. So at least that, yes, like I'm pretty sad from October, but I'm really hoping that November will be so much better. And yes, it was a shorter wrap-up than usual, but I still hope that you enjoyed it. Please tell me, how was your October reading month? Did you read a lot? A little? Please tell me in the comments. Yes, until my next video, you can check more videos by me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye everyone!